A final joint resolution is now ready for debate in the European Union Parliament today and tomorrow on India's citizenship law, which has been put forward by 560 of Parliament's 751 MPs who are part of 5 different groups. A vote could take place tomorrow afternoon. The final text says the Citizenship Amendment Act is discriminatory in nature and dangerously divisive. It calls on the Government of India to engage with various sections of the population in peaceful dialogue and to repeal the discriminatory amendments which violates India's international obligations, warns against the increasing nationalism which has resulted in the fueling of religious intolerance and discrimination against Muslims, worried that the National Register of Citizens marks a dangerous shift in the way citizenship will be determined in India and may create a large-scale statelessness crisis and cause immense human suffering. It also says that the protests that broke out around India, particularly on university campuses, in response to the adoption of the Citizenship Amendment Act, were met with a brutal crackdown by security forces.
At the beginning of this week, there were about 6 different resolutions by 6 different groups in the European Parliament that were largely critical of the CAA and India's handling of the protests thereafter. And that comprised of 626 MPs. There is now one joint resolution which has brought the number of MPs down to 560, which is still, of course, a huge majority of that 751-member European Parliament. The group that has not become part of this resolution is other Conservatives. So they have dropped out, but you have 5 other groups that are still there in this joint resolution, which have called the CAA discriminatory in nature, dangerously divisive, calling on the government to engage with those who are protesting and saying that the amendments actually to the Citizenship Act are violative of India's international obligations. They have also said that they are worried that the NRC will cause a statelessness crisis and immense human suffering. They've made a very specific mention in this resolution about the protests that broke out around India and the heavy-handed response of the police in university campuses, the internet shutdowns, and they've particularly made a mention of the way the UP administration has responded to the protests, and also made a specific reference to the arrest of human rights activists like Sadaf Jafar and Akhil Gogoi. Now, the government of India has maintained that the CAA is an internal matter, that India's democratically elected parliament has passed this legislation, and the European Parliament, therefore, in a sense, does not have the locus standi or the right to be commenting on a piece of legislation passed by the Indian government. We know from sources here that throughout this week, India has been lobbying very hard with EU MPs to try and ensure at least that a vote does not take place tomorrow. It's not clear whether a vote will happen. At the moment, it is on the cards, but I think India would feel better if, despite a discussion, a vote did not take place at the end of the day.